Hey, what's going on, Who That Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And welcome to a special edition of the State of the Saints podcast. I'm recording this live inside of my car. As some of you may know, I took a trip to Jacksonville, Florida this weekend. And just sitting out here in my car, man, outside my brother in law's house. And thought that I'd just give you all a little bit of Saints news. I apologize. I don't have any graphics or anything like that. Sorry about my unprofessionalism. I know a lot of people, they interested in that type of stuff, but I still wanted to give you all some Saints news. And today or this evening or tonight, whenever you're watching this video, thought we'll have a little bit of fun, man. Everything been a little bit serious these days, especially when it comes to like Drew Brees and everybody's stance. And there's a lot of things that have divided us in the Who That Nation, man. So I just thought that I kind of, make things a little bit mellow today. And we're going to be talking about some of the worst free agents in Saints history. Now, this comes from an article that came out. I think it was on NOLA.com. You can check it out. But they said the top 5 worst free agents in Saints history. And I got to say, man, there's a lot of guys on the list, the 5 guys they named. You ain't about to get an argument from me. Now, I will say this. There's a couple guys on that list that should probably be replaced by some other guys, which we're going to be talking about. And I ask that you all, if you know of a free agent, after I mentioned the names that you feel like should be on the list, just go ahead and comment down below. The first person in the top 5 they said was Heath Shuler. Now, Heath Shuler, we know that he was a quarterback in the mid-90s for the New Orleans Saints. He came over from the Washington Redskins. He was a guy who was really good at the University of Tennessee. A lot of people thought that he was going to be the answer in Washington, which that sounds like a reoccurring thing. The Washington Redskins think they got a future quarterback, and he turns out to be a bust. Heath Shuler ended up going to the Redskins, and he ended up being beat out by a fellow rookie, Gus Frerotte. And, he ended up going to the New Orleans Saints, which some of us already know he sucked. Wasn't very good. Threw more picks than Razor Ramon. Threw more picks than a pig in a blanket on a dinner plate. And, he just wasn't good, man. Bad vision, bad instincts. Couldn't get the ball down the field. The only completion he can get was to a linebacker and a cornerback and a safety. Wasn't 2 wide receivers. So he definitely was a bust, a waste of time. But that was just something that Mike Dicker, for some apparent reason, just loved. You know what I'm saying? Getting these guys out here that really didn't mean nothing, wasn't benefiting anything. So, yeah, he definitely deserves to be in the top 5. Then they had Wally Williams, man, the offensive tackle that came from the Baltimore Ravens, who had a couple good years for the Baltimore Ravens. But when he came to the Saints, he stole money. Honestly, man, he was getting ran over. Defenses was out there just pushing this boy to the side, man, treating him like an illegitimate stepchild. And, it was just sad, man, watching this dude play. Now, I must say, man, as trash as Wally Williams was, I wouldn't put him on a list. I think there's a few other guys that I can think of other than Wally Williams that deserve to be on the list, but he definitely was trash, like awful, like pathetic, so he deserves to be up there, but in the top 5, I have to say no. Albert Connell. Now, this was interesting right here. Albert Connell, some of y'all probably know, he came from the Washington Redskins, which, honestly, man, I think the Saints should have stopped messing with Redskins when they tried to go out there and get Heath Shuler. But Albert Connell, man, I think he signed like a 4-year deal. I think with like $19 million for the Saints. And he did nothing, man, except be hurt and steal money from Deuce McAllister, man. I know some of y'all probably remember when he broke into Deuce McAllister's locker and stole $4,000, and then he broke into his car. Like, you don't want guys like that on your squad, man. How you making $19 million but gonna go ahead and try to steal $4,000 from Deuce McAllister, man? But he ain't do nothing on the field, man, except waste everybody's time. He wasn't even the best. He wasn't even the best receiver, or even a number 2 receiver at that time. So I really didn't care for Albert Connell. I was wondering what they was thinking when they even tried to go out there and sign him. I just feel like he had like a couple good years for the Redskins, and the Saints thought that they can possibly go out there and I guess try to catch lightning in a bottle like the Redskins did, but it was horrible. Absolutely horrible, man. Wasn't a fan of that. The next person on the list, man, y'all look, y'all know what it is. Jason David. They put him at number one. Jason David. Jason Smoke Turkey David. Anybody that's been following the State of the Saints podcast, you already know that Jason Smoke Turkey David is the number one worst. Well, I take that back. He is the number two worst cornerback or free agent signing that the Saints ever had. Okay, absolutely trash. Now, he came over from the Indianapolis Colts, but the Saints did not do their homework. Look, Jason David is a nickel corner. He was a small guy. He was about a $175, $180. It depends on how sweaty he is. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was not very good on outside. And the Saints gave him outside corner money when he was a nickel corner. I mean, you talking about a guy who was just benefiting from a successful Indianapolis Colts team. But the Saints ended up paying him as outside corner, and that guy was getting roasted and he was getting toasted. Absolutely embarrassing, man. I will never forget when the New Orleans Saints took on the Houston Texans. They took on the Houston Texans, and a young Andre Johnson was out there doing that boy dirty. I'm talking about he was tearing that boy up, ripping him to shreds, beating him about 20, 30 yards. I mean, Andre Johnson was beating Jason David so bad, you would have thought that Jason David was a referee. That's how he looked. He looked like he was running behind Andre Johnson just to make sure he didn't run out of bounds. It was embarrassing. Stole money, stayed hurt, only had like one good game, and that's like on Monday Night Football when he had 2 interceptions. But besides that, man, he was just absolutely trash. Straight up 100% trash. Awful. Pathetic. So he definitely deserves to be on this list, man. But I'm missing somebody, man. I can't think of the next person. I apologize. I know that's 4 people. But if I can put somebody else on the list while I'm thinking about it, y'all already know where I'm going with it. The number one worst free agent in Saints history, Fred Thomas. That's right. Fred freaking Thomas is the worst Saints free agent ever. Okay, Fred Thomas was awful. He was absolutely awful, man. Could not cover anybody with a bed sheet. He couldn't cover you. Man, he couldn't cover you if he was an undercover cop. Dude was horrible. Anytime a wide receiver catches a pass on his back and rolls into the end zone on you, that tells you everything that you need to know about Fred Thomas. Fred Thomas was awful, folks. Absolutely awful. I mean, the Saints, for a long time, they could not get good free agents. They could not get quality free agents to come in here. And I don't know if it was front office. I don't know what it was, but those guys were awful, man. Now, you can name a few good free agents, I'm sure. But for a long time, man, they couldn't do nothing. They could not do anything at all, man. Like, anybody that they signed was always towards the tail end of their career, and guys that wasn't really good at all. It's like they were washed up, or they was like one of those guys who probably just had one good year, and then the Saints was like, oh, man, we got to snatch them up. Now, over the past couple of years, the Saints have been doing a better job with free agents. I think we all can agree to that. I think we know about people like Demario Davis, other guys that have come to the Saints organization, Ted Ginn Jr., guys that can actually benefit. And we cannot forget about Drew Brees, so they've been doing a good job over the past 15 years. But before 2006, man, they had some trash out there. But I'm about to open the floor up to you all to see some of the names that you all mentioned and also give some shout outs. Zach Holden. Zach, what's going on, man? Zach, number 1 on the list. Sheets, what's going on, man? Kicks Da Vinci says Bird 31. Abso-freaking-lutely. Jarius Byrd. We cannot forget about Jarius Byrd. Definitely was a guy that stole money Oh, and speaking of which, nah, Brandon Browner was the guy that was on the list, who we about to talk about in a few minutes. But Jarius Byrd was definitely one of those guys who stole money. Had a 6-year deal, came over from the Buffalo Bills, was known as a ball hawk. And I gotta say this though, like in the defense of Jarius Byrd, the way the Saints were trying to play Jarius Byrd, it didn't fit his skill set. See, the Saints end up getting him right after the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. And that's when everybody wanted to play kind of like that triangle type defense where you had your safety that was kind of lurking on the outside, kind of similar to what Earl Thomas did with Seattle. And they end up getting Rob Ryan as the defensive coordinator, and Sean Payton wanted to replicate what the Seattle Seahawks were doing. That's why you seen them go out there and get Stanley Jean-Baptiste, because he was the same height and weight as a Richard Sherman. You know, guys like that. Then you had, at the time, Keenan Lewis. So they were trying to replicate what the Seattle Seahawks were doing. And they felt like by getting Jarius Byrd, a guy that's a ball hawk and a guy that had good instincts, maybe they can replicate what Earl Thomas does out there in Seattle. And it didn't work out. And not to mention that Jarius Byrd stayed on the sidelines injured more so than he was in the game. Jarius Byrd only had like one double-digit interception game in his entire career as a Saint. But I think we all can agree that it was a waste of money because the Saints did not get a return on their investment when it came to Jarius Byrd. Now, I'm interested to know what type of player Jarius Byrd would have been pending some of the injuries. But I really believe that the Saints did not. They did not use him in the right way. That didn't complement his skill set. So maybe if they did, maybe Jarius Byrd would have been a better player, would have been a better defensive player for the Saints. But yeah, he definitely was. You have to say he was a bust. Steve Walsh, Tebucky Jones, and Albert Connell. Steve Walsh, yeah, I guess you can say that, man. Steve Walsh was one of those guys, to be honest with you. The Dallas Cowboys just wanted to get rid of him, because they didn't want anybody lurking through the shadows. And as long as Steve Walsh was the backup quarterback, anytime Troy Aikman would have made a mistake or something like that, people would have been calling for Steve Walsh. So I think the Dallas Cowboys got rid of him just to kind of help Troy Aikman's, psyche or whatever like that, and build his confidence, and don't feel like he was going to get the old yank. You know what I'm saying? If he goes out there and make mistakes. So he ended up going to the Saints. And, I'm not going to talk about Steve Walsh too bad, man. Anytime, you get a song in New Orleans after you, man, you done some things. I know some of y'all probably remember the old famous Steve Walsh song, like from the Vanilla Ice, beat or whatever like that. Back in the day it was like Steve Walsh, baby. Doom, 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 doom. Steve Walsh, baby. So anytime you get a song, I give you the benefit of the doubt because, they gave him a song, so he couldn't have been that bad. So I wouldn't put him on the bust list. Michael Haynes, wide receiver from the Falcons. Michael Haynes, man, look, I get it, Mike. No, I get what you're saying, Mike. It makes sense. But I'm gonna give some of these guys the benefit of the doubt because we all know during that time the Saints had a much better defense than they did offense. I don't think they really paid that much attention to the offense, and they really didn't have a really good offensive game plan, man. So a lot of the guys kind of suffered because the Saints were more of a defensive-oriented team. Jim Mora was one of the best defensive minds in football. But it's very interesting to know if the Saints would have got themselves an offensive mastermind, how good the offense would have been. You probably would have said the Saints would have had at least one Super Bowl in the 90s, man, or the late 80s. So I think a lot of the guys that we're bringing up right now had a lot to do with the fact that the Saints didn't really pay that much attention to the offense during that time. But Michael Haynes, he had his moments. He wasn't just god-awful. I just think the offense was just god-awful at that time. Brandon Browner, man, absolutely. Brandon Browner was absolutely pathetic for the Saints. He was a guy that was over the hill past his prime. Probably some of his best days were clearly behind him. The Saints basically just signed him because he was a big physical body. And to be honest with you, his passion to me was gone. This guy already had like 2 Super Bowls. And during that time, I just feel like when guys start to win Super Bowls and championships, that's what you play the game for. So if you're lucky to get championships early in your career, you can go out there and go play to the highest bidder. You can sell yourself to the highest bidder, excuse me. So I feel like Brandon Browner already had a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, already had a Super Bowl with the Patriots. He was just out here just trying to take money. And I feel like he really didn't care about playing. I don't think he really cared about what people thought about him. And we don't really care that much for Dennis Allen, that much. Some of us don't, but you have to say, man, you have to give him some props and some respect and put some on his name at the way that he came at Brandon Brown on the sidelines for his lack of passion. So Brandon Brown definitely was a bust. Stayed getting smoked. Ted Ginn Jr. probably would have broke the touchdown record that game when the Carolina Panthers came to town and played the Saints if he had better hands. I mean, he was out there, man. He was just running right past Brandon Browner. But Browner was a guy that I just think that was he wasn't really good, and he really didn't care. So that's just my honest opinion. Jake Reed. Yeah, Jake Reed, I think you can probably throw him into that category. Jake Reed, best days were behind him. I mean, he was the third guy on the depth chart for the Minnesota Vikings. I think y'all remember when the Minnesota Vikings had that high-powered offense when they had Randall Cunningham and Randy Moss and they had Chris Carter, and Jake Reed was like the guy that was right behind everybody. So I just feel like some of his best days were behind him when he signed with the New Orleans Saints, and I feel like it was too little too late. Now I feel like with Jake Reed, like if he would have came a little bit earlier to the Saints, he probably would have been one of those great Saints that we think of. But I just feel like by him playing for the Minnesota Vikings and him, being behind Chris Carter all those years and then Randy Moss still in the spotlight too, I feel like, it probably, robbed him of a couple of years. He would have been productive for the Saints. But so I'm kind of on the fence with the Jake Reed thing. Fred Thomas acquired from the Seahawks in 2000. Yeah, we already mentioned him. Jason Bombs over Baghdad David. Brad Mustard. Yeah, that's an interesting name. Yeah, I would definitely put him on the list, man. Wasn't really good. Guy that stole money. He tried hard, man, but it just wasn't it. I mean, he just wasn't it. Fred Thomas, aka Highway 22. James Laurinaitis and Champ Bailey. Yeah, those were guys that the Saints signed too little, too late. James Laurinaitis' best days were in St. Louis, where he was the heart and soul of the defense. He was a guy that was never good when it came to coverage, but he was always a good tackler, and he was a tough guy. Champ Bailey, man, we know that Champ Bailey was like in his 15th, 16th year. He probably felt like he still had a little bit left in the tank. And as y'all know, he retired in the middle of the season. So, I mean, at the beginning of the season. So, Champ Bailey coming to the New Orleans Saints wasn't a good idea. I just feel like Champ Bailey's career in his mind was pretty much up at that time. And maybe he just felt like it was just time to, wrap it up. Brandon Browner was worse than Fred Thomas to me. Cross, I mean, look, I get it, but to me, Fred Thomas was horrible. Fred Thomas was absolutely horrible. And look, Cross, I get what you're saying. I guess like if you look at it from a small sample size, you can make that argument. But the fact that Fred Thomas played for the Saints for about 3 to 4 years, stinking it up, getting smoked, roasted, and toasted, and just allowing people on the offensive side of the ball to do whatever they wanted to him, I think you got to give him the championship belt. Brandon Browner, it was just a small sample size. But if we were looking at it in small sample sizes, I think that you would probably have to put Brandon Browner in there. I wouldn't argue with you on that one. Man, you bringing up some bad days for sure. Yeah, man. I mean, this is just awful. Those are some awful times. But I just thought it would be an interesting topic, man. Because, the article came out and it just made me think about it, man, about some of the bad times that we had, man, some of these players that were wasting time and money. And, sometimes, it's good for us to look back to appreciate what we have today. Jarius Byrd, worst draft day trade list next. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I think we all know what number one is. We all know what the number one worst draft day trade was. We all know. None of these names need to come up out of any of our Saints' mouth this season. Yeah. Cam Meredith. Yeah, Cam Meredith, I think you have to put him on the bust list. All he did was come from Chicago. He came off an ACL tear, and the Saints signed him. and they thought that they would be able to, get some quality out of him, possibly being a number two receiver, but it just didn't work out, man. I mean, I just think that ACL injury kind of just hurt his career, and a lot of people aren't gonna be like Wes Welker or Adrian Peterson, try to fight hard as they can, trying to come back better than ever. So I think Cam Meredith probably didn't push himself hard enough, and maybe that's one of the reasons why he's no longer a Saint. Honorable mention Kobe Fleener. Kobe Fleener, I just feel like we deal with concussion issues, man. Kobe Fleener wasn't really tough. He was a little bit soft. He wasn't a guy that we thought that he was going to be coming from the Indianapolis Colts, but I do feel like concussions kind of played a huge factor to his career with the New Orleans Saints. And I'm interested to know what type of player he would have been if you didn't put those concussions in. I mean, some tight ends aren't going to be guys that are really good at blocking. Some tight ends are going to be good pass catchers. So I feel like if Kobe Fleener didn't suffer from some of those concussions, and you have to keep in mind, man, just because a guy gets out of concussion protocol does not mean that their concussion woes are over. So interested to know how Kobe Fleener's career would have panned out if he didn't have to deal with the concussions. Steve Walsh was good at Miami. I don't know what happened to him in the NFL. Well, I think what happened with Steve Walsh is very, very simple. Number one, Johnson, his old college coach, as his coach. And number two, he wasn't the guy they wanted. They did not want him at quarterback. They wanted Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman was the guy that they wanted to be the future of the Dallas Cowboys. So if you can mind that. And also, I mean, when people keep on telling you you're not the guy, it takes a special guy and a strong guy to be like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So maybe Steve Walsh didn't have that inside of him to say, man, you think I'm the guy? Why, man, watch this. And they go out there and they try to, prove the naysayers wrong. So I think if Steve Walsh would have had some coaches that can rally behind him and the guys that can actually kind of build something around him, maybe he would have been a better quarterback. I mean, he had a good arm. I mean, he was pretty decent when it came to accuracy, but I just don't think that people really took the time out to really try to invest in him and put a team around him. So, I mean, it worked at Miami, but didn't work in the pros. The U had so many studs. I guess it was easy for Walsh to shine in college. Yeah, I mean, that's true. At that time, man, that's when the U was really on fire, man. That's when they had all those great players and stuff like that, man. That's when they had like all those defensive players and you had like people like Michael Irvin and all those other guys out there. That's when the U was out there hanging out with Uncle Luke and them, So, I mean, for you to be a quarterback, I mean, that's an embarrassment of riches. I mean, you can put any mediocre quarterback inside of that system and they would flourish. I mean, we know about Gino Torretta, around that time, Vinny Testaverde, you know what I'm saying? All these other good, all these other guys out there. I don't know if maybe Steve DeBerg, if I'm not mistaken. I think he went there. So, I mean, you had all these guys out there, that played pretty good, in college. But when it came to the pros, man, they wasn't very good. It's probably because, like you said, they had an embarrassment of riches. So I think that had something to do with it. But I think Steve Walsh would have been a little bit better than some of those guys that I named. Let's see. Fred Thomas started for 7 years for the Saints. Yeah, 7 years too many. Who that? You crazy? Who that? It's going to be interesting how the NFL deals with this COVID-19. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to do these things. But I said it. Shouts out to my guy John Anderson. I said this in an interview with him on his YouTube channel, Lane Yap Legends. Y'all check out the interview. It's on Lane Yap Legends. I said I'd rather play football and then play football and not have fans in the stands than not have football at all. I mean, that's just what it is, man. I know we all want to go to the game. We want to cheer to the top of our lungs. We want to say who that. But I'd rather sit at home and watch the game and it actually be on TV than for us not to have football at all. So I just as long as they're being responsible, making sure they're not putting people in harm's way. We're seeing like some of these numbers and stuff like that with COVID-19, they're increasing. As of right now, numbers are going up. So they got to be very, very careful. But if they can find ways to play the game and not put their players in harm's way, I'm all for it. I know this wasn't a free agent signing, but a trade. But Ellerby trade was bad. I have to disagree with that one. Darnell Ellerby, I mean, he was a pretty good linebacker. The problem is he couldn't stay healthy. He was good, man. Like a lot of these guys, like I said, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and because there's still a matter of what if when it comes to these guys. Ellerby was a really good linebacker. Like I said, he just couldn't stay healthy. When he was on the field, man, he was flying around the field. He was out there, stopping guys from catching the ball. And to me, man, I just feel like if he was healthy, man, who knows, man, we probably would be talking to him about him like we talk about the Mario Davis. He just couldn't stay healthy, man. I mean, when he played, man, he was out there and he performed really well. But the best ability is availability. So I feel like he wasn't available enough. So I can understand why you want to consider him as a bust. But to me, man, there's a lot of question marks. I'm talking about guys that, I mean, you pretty much saw that they were just absolutely hot garbage as soon as they got out there. You knew it was just a big, huge waste of time. When Ellerby was out there, you didn't feel like it was a waste of time. You used to be upset when he just wasn't a part of the lineup. Bird signing was horrid. Bird signing was horrid more so than what they gave up for him and how much money they gave him. So, yeah, I think that was pretty horrible. I mean, he did steal some money, though. I would like to see Jamar Chase in a Saints uniform next year. I don't think that's ever gonna happen, man. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think the Saints are going to lose those many games. Jamar Chase is a really good wide receiver. You can argue now to say that he is the best wide receiver in football, in college football. Excuse me. The only person that can possibly give him a run for his money, in my opinion, right now, is the wide receiver from Minnesota, whose names escapes me. He's just as good as he is, but Jamar Chase is like on another level. So I think he's probably going to be in the top 5, top 10, being going off the board. So I don't think the Saints are going to be horrible enough to get Jamar Chase. I think that he just has like this unbelievable skill set that teams are going to be salivating at, and he's going to be going by the time the Saints pick. Unless, the Saints just really just take a downward spiral and a nosedive, I don't see them getting Jamar Chase. I really don't. The top 5 worst Saints coaches. Top 5 worst Saints coaches. Man, I would have to really go down and listen and check and see. One, person in particular I have to throw in there would be Bum Phillips. Bum Phillips wasn't a really good Saints coach. Mike Dicker would have to be on that list. Jared DiNardo would have to be on that list. Man, just so much trash has come through to the New Orleans Saints over the past few years when it came to coaching. It's good to have some good stability, with the organization now. But those are some names that just stick out to me. Bum Phillips, Jared DiNardo, and like you said, Mike Dicker. Mike Dicker, Bum Phillips, Jared DiNardo are the guys that kind of stick out to me. Those are some guys. I wouldn't put Jim Haslett on the list or anything like that. Jim Haslett, the Saints had some good seasons. Not to mention he was the first coach in Saints history to win a playoff game. Jim Haslett was a little bit of a defensive mind, kind of similar to what Jim Mora was. So I just think that, the defense always was pretty good under Jim Haslett. The offense just wasn't good. So I wouldn't put him in that category. You can make an argument to say that Jim Haslett may be like the 3rd greatest coach that the Saints ever had. I mean, you'll have to put Sean Payton and Jim Mora ahead of him, of course. But Dicker made some bad draft picks. Yeah. Mike Dicker was I don't know, man. Mike Dicker was too much of a me guy to me. Like he is what Sean Payton is, but the only difference between him and Sean Payton is Sean Payton, has room to do that, and he's smart. In my opinion, he's more smarter than Mike Dicker was. Mike Dicker wanted you to sing his praises just because he coached the 85 Bears. And he came in and he didn't want people to undermine him. He wanted people to be like, man, look at me. I'm about to turn around this franchise. This is my team. These are my players, But I think that's something that kind of hurt Mike Dicker, in my honest and humble opinion. You know what I'm saying? It was just the fact that He didn't want to listen to anybody. I feel like the coaching, like the front office with Tom Benson gave him too much power, and that just wasn't his thing, man. I mean, the Chicago Bears had a really good they had a really good front office at the time, man. I mean, you had a really good running game, you had a really good defense, and like I said, George Halas and stuff like that, the ownership, they made sure that they put the right players in place. Mike Dicker was just out there, you know what I'm saying, to me. He was just out there, and he was just a person. When you had like somebody like Buddy Ryan as your defensive coordinator, I mean, the godfather of the 46 defense. All you have to do is sit out there with your sweater vest on and fold your arms and watch the defense just go out there and just absolutely rip offenses to shreds. So I just think that he was a little bit overrated when he came to the Saints. A defensive coordinator with the big belly and brother called coaching NFL. You talking about Rob Ryan? Rob Ryan, to me, is a good defensive coach, but look, the thing about it is, man, what separates good coaches from great coaches is guys being able to coach players, but at the same time, okay, this is the coach and I'm the player. Rob Ryan wanted to be a little bit too buddy with the players, and not to mention, man, he wanted to undermine Sean Payton. That's not how it works, man. That's not how you want to do business, okay? I mean, I feel like he probably wanted to be the coach. It's kind of similar to what the Dallas Cowboys was back in 2007, 2008. When Wade Phillips was there, and then you had Jason Garrett as the assistant coach, and Jason Garrett was the guy that was next in line, and Wade Phillips knew that. So it was kind of borderline sabotagey, if you will. Jason Garrett wanted to be the next guy up, so you can say that he kind of sabotaged the game to make Wade Phillips look bad. And in my opinion, I think that when it came to Rob Ryan, I think that he wanted to be, the guy when, let's just say, for example, like he wanted to be the cool parent. When Sean Payton was scolding the players, he wanted to be the parent, like, oh, come here, look, here's some ice cream. You want to watch your favorite show? It was kind of like that. But the thing about it is, when it was time to play on the field, the players didn't really give him the respect that you probably would give to a coach that you would just sit up there and be like, man, if I don't do this, then I'm gonna get cut. So I think that Rob Ryan just kind of, he is a good coach, but at the same time, he doesn't know how to coach. But the defense, they were okay, man. They just had a couple problems, and they just wasn't disciplined. You had a lot of guys, you had 12 men on the field all the time. You know what I'm saying? You was always playing behind the 8 ball. Guys were on the sidelines fussing. People were calling out players and coaches and stuff like that. And we all know that Sean Payton don't like locker rooms like that. We rejoice and we cheer the locker room, and we laugh at, some of the post-game dances and the Saints, being silly inside of the locker room after games. And, that's the type of locker room that Sean Payton has always wanted. And when Rob Ryan was there, you can see the dissension inside of the locker room. And there were a lot of me guys in the locker room instead of a bunch of we guys. So I think that's what happened with Rob Ryan. But, I mean, I would have to say that's one of the reasons why the team suffered during that time. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about Mike Dicker. Mike Dicker definitely wasn't really good. Sean Payton is a media hound. Ernest, what you mean by that? Can you elaborate on that when you say media hound? I think I have an idea, but I want to make sure that my response is kind of coincides with what you're talking about there. Look, Sean Payton is the greatest coach the Saints ever had, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get into heated debates as Saints fans, because we don't really have much to compare them to. Just somebody just asking me that question and saying, like, who is the worst coach in Saints history, I think we can name off a whole bunch of people. But if we talk about who are the best Saints coaches in history, I think that we'll be like, there's only a handful of guys. And that's the reason why I feel like people want to give Sean Payton the benefit of the doubt. And that's one of the reasons why, I get a little bit of backlash from some members of the Who Dat Nation when I'm critical of Sean Payton. Look, man, I demand excellence. Just like, if I'm doing this show and I'm doing a video, you guys want me to give you, an honest assessment of the team. And I feel like we need to do the same thing when it comes to the players and the coaches. That doesn't mean that you don't like the people. That don't mean that you don't respect them. But at the same time, you shouldn't give a guy a pass just because, oh, they won these playoff games. Oh, they won us a Super Bowl. So what, man? I mean, the league just constantly goes on and on. So why should we just sit up there and just, subject ourselves when we know this team should have about 2 or 3 Super Bowls? But Sean Payton, I mean, you can't take anything away from him. You got to get a devil his due. He is the greatest coach that the Saints have ever had. And, I just feel like a lot of the reasons why the Saints aren't successful or getting over this hump over the past couple of years had a lot to do with him and over him overthinking himself and also just calling bad plays, at times in the game where I feel like the Saints need, to probably just be predictable. He tries so hard to be unpredictable to a point where when he needs to be predictable, he still tries to be unpredictable. Number one coach we have, but his play calling been suspect at times. Yeah, that's why I said Jarhead. I mean, that's what it is. Sean Payton overthinks himself. He just, I don't know, man. I mean, he just overthinks himself at times. I'm a firm believer. I feel like who cares if a team know that you're gonna run the football when it's 3rd and 1? That's what the offensive line get paid to do. That's what these guys get paid to do. They get paid to block. And how can you sit up here and have these guys on your team and say, I got the best team when you don't trust these guys? So, and I'm not even talking about on 4th down and all that kind of stuff, going for it on 4th down and all that. But when it's 3rd and 1, you don't have to throw the football. Sometimes you have to be predictable. I meant love and daring attention means wants to prove, his medal as the best offensive mind ever. I agree with that, Ernest. A lot of times I feel like he wants to prove to people like, man, watch this. He already feel like, he has room to talk because he took a lowly Saints franchise that was known as being the laughingstock of the league, known for being like that team that would lose games and people hold their nose just to watch the games. He took a franchise like that and made them relevant. So he feel like you can't tell him nothing. And then all of a sudden, he takes all these different players that teams have possibly gave up on, and he used them to his advantage. So I get it. You know what I'm saying? Look, in ways he does have room to talk. He does have room to stick out his chest. But I mean, look, man. I mean, you can't be still, trying to act as if, what I'm saying, like you the man, because you won a Super Bowl 11 years ago. I mean, that was quite a while back. So it's time to, it's really time for you to step up. And I think that Sean Payton, like sometimes he forgets that at times. Like to me, man, I'm appreciative of him bringing a Super Bowl to the Saints, but I mean, I'd be lying to you if I didn't feel like they should have had more than just one. I'm going to weigh it now. If the Saints don't make it, I think we need to reevaluate the coaching position. Can't keep letting him live off a 11-year-old Super Bowl. Yeah, Iceman T. I mean, that's true. A lot of people, like I said, they don't really hold the Saints coaches, staff, and they don't hold like Drew Brees accountable when they make mistakes. Like I said, it has a lot to do with the fact that they did bring a Super Bowl to New Orleans, but not me. Shoot, I'm gonna keep on telling you. Like, if I feel like they had a good game plan, I'll tell you. If I feel like their game plan is the reason why the Saints lost that game, I'm gonna tell you that too. What do you think about our defense? What look like with Mike Singletary as the defensive coordinator? I don't know what the defense will look like with Mike Singletary. I really couldn't tell you that. I mean, Mike Singletary is a really good coach. He's a great human being, a decent man. Anybody, for the exception of, well, I don't even want to say that now. I was going to say Davis, and Troy Smith, probably the only 2 people that probably have something to say about him. But even Smith now, you know what I'm saying, Davis now, Davis say, he appreciate him coming at him like that, but he was a young, dumb player. When he had the whole press conference talking about he want winners, and he sent Davis, into Vernon Davis, I'm talking about. He sent Vernon Davis to the locker room after Vernon Davis quit on the play. So I mean, he's a guy that I feel like will bring some discipline to the locker room. But to in my opinion, I think that kind of coaching style can kind of get a little bit stale. I think it probably will work for a couple years, and then eventually it'll go on deaf ears. So sometimes you got to be able to reinvent yourself. And Mike Singletary has been the same way ever since he's came into the league, ever since he's been a player, ever since he's started becoming a coordinator, and even when he was a head coach. So I think that he might start off being good, but might end up taking a little bit of a turn because of how he coaches. The Saints should go back to the '05 or '06 jerseys with the Louisiana patch. Yeah, that'll be interesting right there. Um, I mean, I think that will be a good look. No doubt the best ever for the Saints. Uh, Let me see. Kevin Chase will be long gone before the Saints pick. Yeah, Chase gonna be gone, man. That man gonna be out of here. But my thing is, how many times do we have to say run the ball? It's not like we don't have talent at the position. We have a Pro Bowl running back, and he still won't run the ball. Man, that's just the way that Sean is, man. Sean is completely impatient. Like he's not patient at all. He wants to get the ball down the field. He wants to generate points, which I understand. I mean, that's the point of the offense. But I just think his lack of patience is his Achilles heel year after year, time after time. Sometimes you got to be able to, just be patient, man, and allow the running game to start to percolate a little bit. Let it warm up. I just think that if a guy doesn't start off from the bat, I mean, honestly, you can tell if the Saints are going to run the football by the way the first 15 plays of a drive is when a game starts. If Drew Brees gives Alvin Kamara the ball and Alvin Kamara runs about 5 or 6 yards, and then after that he runs 4 yards again and he gets the first down, then the Saints probably going to commit to the run throughout the game. But if they hand the ball off to Alvin Kamara and he gets 1 yard on first down, another yard on second down, they probably not gonna run the ball for the rest of the game. That's just how he is, man. He just impatient. I mean, that's just the way that he is. He wants tempo, tempo, tempo. But I mean, like I said, I mean, people can get mad at me all they want to. Like I said, I get criticism for me saying this, but I don't feel like the Saints are going to win a damn thing until they run the football and they're more committed to the run. And yeah, you know what I'm saying, they'll put up points and yeah, they'll generate excitement and yeah, they'll have us on the edge of our seat and they'll have us going through the motions game after game and we'll be cheering like I don't know what when they win, but that kind of football is not going to get you where you need to be. You know what I'm saying? They'll get you fans, but it's not going to get you any Super Bowls. So sometimes you got to play that ugly ball in order for you to generate success. And as long as Sean Payton just thinks that throwing the football all over the place and not being patient enough to allow his running game to develop, the Saints are going to have the same issues, no matter if they're 11-5, no matter if they're 12-4, no matter if they're 13-3 or 14-2. The Saints are going to have the same issues over and over again, and that is close but no cigars. Saints need to let Murray free. Yeah, I agree. I said this on the last podcast. I just don't feel like Sean Payton just really likes to rely on guys that aren't his guys. The guys that he drafted, the guys that he brought into the organization. I think when you look at Murray, he looks at him as just being a utility running back, a guy that's a change of pace from his running back, Alvin Kamara. But look, this guy's on your team. Your front office, rather it was you or Mickey Loomis or anybody else that's part of the scouting department, made up in their mind that Latavius Murray will be the answer for a departing Mark Ingram. And you have to trust that guy. You got to believe in Latavius Murray, which I do. I like Latavius Murray a lot. And I just think that anybody that's saying that Latavius Murray is a waste of money or Latavius Murray is not that good, I feel like they are not being fair to Latavius Murray because Latavius Murray is not being utilized the way that he needs to. When Latavius Murray is in a game, he plays really well. When he was a starter, when Alvin Kamara was out, he played really well. And it's not his fault that Sean Payton does not want to go to him from time to time and not want to implement him in the offense. So Latavius Murray, if you allow him to pretty much warm up, you allow him to beat up on the front line of defenses for other teams. I think that around the third or the fourth quarter, I think the running game will be really, really good. But That's just the way that Sean Payton is, and it's sad. It's really sad. It's sad, man. Sean is killing his and Drew legacy at the same damn time. Iceman, I don't want to say that they're killing Drew legacy or his legacy. Uh, I think it's pretty much already cemented that these two guys are like two of the best, head coach, quarterback duos in NFL history. I think it's already set in stone. Anything else could just kind of just be adding on to it. So I think that people already mentioned Sean Payton as one of the best coaches in football. Anytime they start bringing up head coaches, I mean, his name come up. Anytime they talk about all-time great quarterbacks, they talk about Drew Brees. So I don't think it's hurting their legacy. Now you can make an argument to say, they're causing the add-on to their legacy, by not committing to the run and being too stubborn to actually want to run the football and not allowing the running game to try to be a part of the offense. Now you can make that argument, but I don't think what they're doing is going to hurt their legacy because bringing, like I said, this may sound crazy. I know it's frustrating, but bringing a Super Bowl to a lowly franchise, I think that's going to always be a part of their legacy, and that's something that you can't take away from them. Do you think it's Sean and Drew being together is the reason we don't commit to the run? When Bridgewater started, we ran it damn well. Yeah, I mean, that's just the truth. And I said this before. I feel like with the Saints drafting Cesar Ruiz, getting rid of Larry Warford, signing Andrews Pete to a 5-year deal, I think the Saints understand that whoever comes in is going to he's going to have to learn the offense, and I think the Saints understand they're going to have to run the football. I do feel like the reason why the Saints don't run the football is because Drew Brees is still on the team. Sean has really hitched his wagon to Drew. Sometimes I feel like he lives vicariously through Drew. I think that Drew Brees reminds Sean Payton a lot of himself, and I think a lot of people, feel, a lot of the touchdowns and the yards that Drew Brees has a lot to do with the offense that Sean Payton came up with. And I feel like when Drew Brees leaves, I think the Saints are going to change their offense because they're not going to have one of the most accurate marksmen that ever played the quarterback position. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to have him anymore. They're not going to be able to have Drew Brees to bail them out of situations or sustain drives. So I think it does have a lot to do with the fact that Sean understands Drew. They've been with each other for the past 15 years. I'm pretty sure at this time they can finish each other's sentences and they know the direction where each other is going to go, rather it's a good play or a bad play. So I think Drew does have I think he is the reason why Sean doesn't run the ball a lot. Run the dang ball, run it. Famously said by Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side. Yeah, I mean, you can say Sandra Bullock, you can say Marty Schottenheimer, you can say George Halas. I mean, so many greats want to run the football, want to commit to the run, but Sean Payton needs to follow their lead. All that savior of the Saints is nonsense. Sean can't even get out of the first round, but he's so cocky, like he got rings like Belichick. Well, I mean, how many coaches have rings like Belichick? Not many. How many people can generate the success that Belichick can? Not many. So I think that, once again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he took a lowly, struggling franchise to the Super Bowl. And that's something that can never be taken away from him. I think Sean's legacy is on the line. He is not out the woods yet. Only one ring in 13 years. That's not transcendent. Well, I mean, I have to disagree with that, Iceman T, because, look at Andy Reid. Andy Reid won his first Super Bowl last season. So, Andy Reid is one of the all-time great coaches. People consider him being an all-time great. And I'm pretty sure when he retires, he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. I feel like Sean Payton is the same way. Sean Payton is going to go to the Hall of Fame. Like, there's no doubt about that. He is going to go to the Hall of Fame. And trust and believe, Iceman, like, if the Saints decide that they want to get rid of Sean Payton, if they like, okay, let's go in another direction, Sean Payton's phone going to be ringing off the hook the very next day. Okay? I mean, That's just facts. I mean, people love Sean Payton. Sean Payton is a really good coach. He frustrates us as fans, but trust and believe if the Saints were to get rid of him, like his phone will be ringing the very next day. If the Saints get rid of him on a Sunday, he'll have a job by Monday. Murray has 7 carries versus the Vikings in the most important game of the year. That's on Sean Payton. For real, is Sean Payton even better than Mike Tomlin and Andy Reid? I think he better than Mike Tomlin, but I don't think he better than Andy Reid. But like I said, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, they in that same category. And some people will probably put Andy Reid ahead of him now that he won a Super Bowl. But as far as Mike Tomlin is concerned, like people can make an argument to say that Mike Tomlin actually won a Super Bowl with Bill Cowher players. So Mike Tomlin got more Super Bowls than Peyton. Um, do he? I don't think he only had one, don't he? He been to the Super Bowl twice, but he didn't win. Like he went. I think he went. I think the year after he became the head coach. That was with Mike Tomlin players, and then he went again. Right, then he went again, and they played against the Green Bay Packers and they lost. Now the only Super Bowl. Nah, the only Super Bowl I think he have is when the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Cardinals. That's when they beat the Cardinals, and then he went to the Super Bowl again, and they played the Green Bay Packers. I think that was in 2010, and he lost. So I mean, Mike Tomlin is a good coach, man. I hate comparing him to a lot of respect for Mike Tomlin, but I mean, I think I think Sean Payton will end up going. Let me see, but TJ, that's like saying Mike McCartney is just as good as Sean because he got one ring. I don't think people look at Mike McCartney and Sean Payton in the same light. I just think that people look at Mike McCarthy as a decent coach, but it just I don't think they look at him the same way that they look at Sean Payton. Mike McCarthy is a good coach. I think that he deserves a job to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't think that people look at him as being better than Sean Payton. And it probably has something to do with the fact that, like I said, Sean Payton hitched his wagon to Drew Brees. And Drew Brees got all these statistical records. And, people look at Drew Brees and they're like, well, man, this guy came out of San Diego, didn't have a bunch of arm strength. Wouldn't wow you with his arm, wouldn't wow you with his intangibles, but look at him, got all these statistical records. How did that happen? It has something to do with the coach, and they look at Sean Payton. So, and I think when you look at Mike McCarthy with Aaron Rodgers, and people already thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be good, being a successor to Brett Favre. So I think that people look at Mike McCartney and Sean Payton differently, probably because of the quarterbacks that they have. That's not okay though, TJ. You can't do that as a coach. It's on Sean Payton for not putting a D around Drew for years. Well, I agree with that, Iceman. I agree with the fact that they don't, him not putting a defense around Drew Brees, and that is his fault. I think that Sean Payton is too. Let me see. He's too loyal to some of his people. Like I understand that these guys were guys that you grew up coaching with and stuff like that, like the Joe Vitts, like the Lombardis, like the Johnsons. I get it. But I feel like he held on to those guys way too long. I feel like he just had those guys part of his coaching staff for a long time, and I feel like that was the reason why they weren't successful. Because it's funny to me, as soon as he let those guys go and he went out there and got Aaron Glenn and he went out there and got Mike Nolan and he went out there and got Dennis Allen, that's when like the defense started to turn around. So I think that had a lot to do with it too. And not to mention, you went out there and you got Jeff Ireland, I think, who came from the Giants, if I'm not mistaken. He was a part of their front office. So I think that if he probably would have went ahead and cut ties with some of those defensive coordinators, a couple years earlier than a couple years too late, who knows what we would have been. Tomlin is better than Sean Payton. Cut it out. I don't know about that. I don't know if you're a better coach than Sean Payton. All I know is, if we want to talk about it head to head, Mike Tomlin has never beat Sean Payton I think in a head-to-head, ever. I don't think they ever beat the New Orleans Saints when Mike Tomlin was the coach. So you could say that, okay? If we talking about coaching, if we want to talk about who better, that's the only thing that we can count on. I mean, I don't think Mike Tomlin ever beat Sean Payton in a head-to-head. I could be wrong. Sean Payton held on to his buddies far too long. Yep, Johnson, Vitt, McMahon, all of them boys. Yep, all of them. All of them he held on too long. I disagree, TJ. Mike Tomlin is better than Sean Payton. If we had Mike Tomlin, maybe the defense should be better. I don't think Mike Tomlin is better than Sean Payton. And I think that's comparing like apples to oranges, because one is a good defensive mind and one is a good, offensive mind. So it depends on what your flavor is, like it depends on what you're into. So I think that you can't really compare them. All I can say is Mike Tomlin never beat Sean Payton in a head-to-head. What are we talking about? I'm late to the party. What's good, TJ? What's good? Who that fam? Man, we talked about the worst free agents in Saints history. Now we're talking about some of the coaches that the Saints have. And then we transition, carry on to Sean Payton legacy. Now we talking, and people are talking about, comparing him to some of the coaches that are in the league right now with Super Bowls. Tampa assistant coach. I just feel like, I don't know, man. I think Mike Tomlin is a really good coach, but I just think that I wouldn't trade. Look, I'll put it like this. I wouldn't trade Sean Payton for Mike Tomlin. I wouldn't. As much as I like Mike Tomlin, I wouldn't trade him, because, man, honestly, what I see in Mike Tomlin, I kind of see in Sean Payton. It's just the other side of the coin. It's like one loves defense, one loves offense. So it's like basically trading one for the other. I'm just saying, Sean gets the praise of the Belichick with the rings of a McCarthy. Well, that's like, man, okay, man. Let me try to explain something. Okay, all rings are not created equal. Okay, this is something that we need to understand. This is for the Who Dat Nation. This is for fans in general. All rings are not created equal. For example, let's look at LeBron James, okay? LeBron James took his talents to South Beach, and he ended up winning 2 championships with the Miami Heat. He had Chris Bosh and he had Dwayne Wade as his supporting cast, and people like, well, you should win because you had 2 All-Stars backing you up. And not to mention, you had Ray Allen as a shooter. You had, Mike Miller as a shooter. You had Udonis Haslem. I mean, anybody can win with guys like that. But then when he left Miami and went back to Cleveland, and then he won a championship, people really start to pay attention to LeBron James and putting him in an all-time great conversation. I say that to say this. Mike McCarthy is a coach. He was a coach of a historical franchise, the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers, the freaking trophy that the champions of football get is named after the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. It's the peasantry. It's the tradition. The historical Green Bay Packers. That is why when people look at Mike McCarthy, they may not look at him, because look who he's being compared to. Vince freaking Lombardi. Okay? I mean, Sean Payton. Okay. Let me see. Aaron Rodgers. I mean, come on, man. Aaron Rodgers. Who does he have to live in a legacy? I mean, think about Bart Starr. Think about Brett Favre. I mean, all these great players. When you think about the Saints, you can honestly say that the New Orleans Saints really didn't have a really positive history until 2006. So if you look at a struggling franchise who had like tickets being sold at a gas station, who basically, if you had 2 Saints tickets on your front seat, your glass got broken, you had 4 on the seat because somebody dropped 2 in there. Of course, you're going to start getting attention after you start winning, because this is a struggling franchise. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron, the Saints had a struggling franchise. And Sean Payton brought legitimacy to an organization that was horrible since their inception. You know what I'm saying? Since their inception, the Saints have been horrible. So that's the reason why I feel like people look at Sean Payton differently. That's the reason why I feel like people look at some of these other teams and they be like, okay, well, Bill Belichick with the Patriots. The Patriots went to the Super Bowl like twice before Bill Belichick even got there. The Pittsburgh Steelers, okay, do I need to tell anybody about the Steel Curtain? Do I need to tell you about, Lampert and you know what I'm saying, and Mean Joe Green and all them other cats, you know what I'm saying, out there, Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swan, you know what I'm saying, Stalwart, Franco Harris, you know what I'm saying, Mel Blanc, you know what I'm saying? Do I need to tell you about any of those guys? You know, like when you have a organization that is baptized in history versus an organization that used to be a laughingstock. Of course, that organization as a laughingstock is probably going to get more attention, and the coaches are going to get a little bit more respect because of how they turned those teams around. So that's probably one of the reasons why Sean Payton is looked at with so much respect, because the Saints were losers and he made them winners and he made them relevant. So that's the reason why I feel like when people are like, well, why don't they talk about Mike Tomlin like Sean Payton or Mike McCarthy? That's because of, like, look at look who they coach. Look at who they're coaching. I mean, they're coaching legendary franchises. The Saints weren't relevant to 2006. You're right. The year we drafted Reggie Bush was the year things turned around. That's true, Thomas. Look, it may frustrate us as fans, and I get it. But at the same time, man, like, let's not pretend. I know we happy. I know we elated, but let's not pretend like this was like we got the history of the 70 Pittsburgh Steelers, the 60 Packers, the 80 49ers, or the 90s Cowboys. We don't, folks. You know, for the past 15 years, the Saints have been one of the most relevant franchises in the NFL. But this is 15 years. The Saints have been, man, what 53 years, going on year number 53. So for 53 years, the New Orleans Saints have been an NFL franchise, and you can argue and say, you know, I guess you can probably throw like the 2000 team in there where they went to the playoffs. But besides that, man, the Saints didn't do much winning. So for us to feel like, okay, man, like those coaches, like Sean Payton is going to be treated equally than a Mike Tomlin, then you wrong. I mean, Mike Tomlin honestly, the only way Mike Tomlin will really truly getting the respect and people like, man, he is just an all-time great coach, he had to win at least about 2 or 3 more Super Bowls. I mean, because you got to look at Chuck Noll. Chuck Noll, what, he won about 4 Super Bowls? He been like 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. So, I mean, unless he about to get like 2 or 3 more Super Bowls, then you can kind of compare yourself to Chuck Noll or, you know, Mike McCarthy, or in this case, Matt LaFleur. You know, like, unless he about to go out there and he about to win like 3 or 4 more Super Bowls, he'll never be on the level of Vince Lombardi. Mike McCarthy would have never been on the level of Vince Lombardi unless he won about 4 Super Bowls. And even like with Shanahan out there in San Francisco. I mean, that's just the way it is, man. Like, people give you way more props by you turning around a struggling franchise than they would about a historical franchise. So that's the reason why I think Sean Payton gets more respect than some of these other coaches like Tomlin and McCarthy. That's the reason why, you know, if you he won 1 Super Bowl and people like, man, he won a Super Bowl, because that Super Bowl that he won with the Saints is kind of like equal to 4 or 5 in the eyes of the media, because the Saints were trash. That's like a couple of years ago. This for my baseball fans out there. Chicago Cubs won the World Series. I mean, the whole world stopped. The freaking Cubs, 102 years, the Cubs, the what they call them, the lovable losers, won the World Series. And that was more than, at that particular time, it was equivalent to the New York Yankees championships. That's what it is. I mean, all championships are not created equal. That's the only thing I can tell you, folks. All championships are not created equal. Because what you think about the problem of the scarcity of minority coaches in the NFL? Well, I think they need to change that, and I think that it is going to change. if I can, if you all can afford me to tell you a little bit of a history lesson, back in the days of the good old boys, the good old boy system, they didn't really have that much respect for black players, being quarterbacks and stuff like that. And the reason why is because, black quarterbacks, black quarterbacks, they had to know how to read defenses, have to understand audibles. They had to understand like where to go with the ball if a defense playing this way. And they felt like, a quarterback was a smart position. And, all of a sudden, as years go by, I mean, we see like more African American quarterbacks in the league. But, I say that to say this, when it came to the defensive side of the football, they felt like it wasn't more about, the X's and O's. It was about instincts and athleticism and ability. I think that just like in the NBA, you're going to start seeing more African American coaches because the NFL is about over 70% African Americans, if I'm not mistaken, or close to it. And I think that once players start to retire, you're going to start seeing guys that going to become head coaches. I don't think that you need to go out here and try to make some of these rules to put in place, because I feel like by allowing teams to get draft picks or get money by signing a head coach that's a minority, I feel like you're still forcing them to do it. We need to get to a point where we can actually, this isn't even news anymore, that we don't even have to think twice about why this guy, become the head coach. I do feel like they're going to have minority head coaches. I do feel like there's a stigma when it comes to black coaches that they feel like these guys aren't smart and they aren't leaders of men. I do feel like black coaches, or any minority of that matter, I think if you have the talent, you have the skills, you have the ability to lead men, then I think that you should get an opportunity to do so. But I do feel like the way that the world is going right now, people are being held accountable for their racist rhetoric, for their racist thoughts, their prejudices. I think that it's only a matter of time before we start to see coaches, different minorities come into some of these teams, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, or some of these other sports that's lacking. So I think that it's going to come pretty soon, but I definitely don't want it to be in the form of a charity case. I want these guys to get coaching opportunities because they're good for the job, not because, oh man, I don't want these people to be cracking down on me. I don't want people protesting in front of the stadium. No, I want you to sign these guys because they are good enough to coach your team, not to shut up the masses, not to make sure that the media is not on your back, but to make sure that you have the right guy in place. But I think it's coming, man. I think that right now, I feel like this is the start of a revolution right now. This is a revolution, and like they said, a revolution will be televised. I think it's being televised right now. It's only a matter of time before things start to change in a positive way. The Cubs winning the series. Yeah, man, the Cubs winning the series was, man, that was huge. How do you feel about Taysom Hill as the next quarterback, since he has a history in college of bad knee injuries? Well, Thomas, he does have a history with that. That's a little bit concerning, but I'm just not sold all the way on Taysom Hill. I think that Taysom Hill can, persuade me that he can be a starter in the league, but you need some snaps, bruh. You know what I'm saying? He only got like 15 snaps throughout his career at the quarterback position. You're not going to be able to just be a Swiss Army knife. You're going to be the every down quarterback, and teams are going to see what you do well, and they're going to see what you don't do well. So right now, I'm on the fence. I'm going to reserve my judgment till all the facts come out. But I don't have enough. I don't see enough out of him for me to say that he's not a starter. But I just believe that he has to play a couple games. But that's all. That's for today, man. If you have any more questions, you can always inbox me, stateofthesaints@gmail.com, or facebook.com, search the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it, man. Appreciate the love and the support that you all give the State of the Saints. We're gonna be back at it. Probably gonna do a live show Sunday night when I return home. So I'll be able to take calls and stuff like that. But you all have a great and productive day. I hope that everybody is having a blessed one, and looking forward to hearing from you all when we go live on Sunday. Till next time, all I gotta say is, who dat?